What if a house could cost more than a small nation's entire annual budget and still be considered a bargain by the person who built it? What if a bedroom could sit 16 feet below the surface of the ocean, or float above a jungle canyon, or rise 27 stories into the sky as a private tower for a single family? Somewhere on this planet right now, water is sliding down a curved glass tube into a lagoon from the deck of a house that cost more than most hospitals. Somewhere a family is sleeping under a retractable roof, watching stars through glass while sharks glide past their headboard on the other side of an acrylic wall. These are not hotels built for the public. These are private worlds, engineered obsessions, monuments to what happens when unlimited money meets untamed imagination. Over the next several minutes, we are going to walk through 25 of them, starting with places you could actually rent for a week and ending with a residence so extreme that architects still argue about whether it should even be called a house. Each one raises the bar higher than the last. By the end, you will never look at the word home the same way again. Villa Amanzi. Perched on the cliffs of Kamala in Phuket, Thailand, Villa Amanzi looks less like a house and more like a glass ledge suspended over the Andaman Sea. Designed by the firm Original Vision, the villa steps down the rock face in a series of cantilevered platforms so that from certain angles it appears to float free of the cliff entirely. Walls of glass slide away completely, dissolving the boundary between the tiled interiors and the tropical air outside. The site itself made construction brutally difficult. Engineers had to anchor the structure directly into volcanic rock, accounting for erosion, monsoon winds, and the constant salt spray rolling up from the waves below. Guests reach the villa by a private road that winds through jungle before revealing the sea view all at once. A deliberate architectural reveal meant to maximize the shock of arrival. The interiors blend contemporary minimalism with Thai craftsmanship, teak detailing, and locally sourced stone that ties the modern structure back to its island setting. It is a relatively accessible starting point in our journey, a villa that can be booked rather than merely dreamed about. But it also establishes the first rule of extreme luxury real estate. The more dangerous and unbuildable the land, the more desirable the address becomes. From here, the stakes only rise. Alila Villas Uluwatu. On the southern tip of Bali, where limestone cliffs drop straight into the Indian Ocean, Alila Villas Uluwatu was built to look like it grew out of the rock itself. The architecture takes its cues from centuries-old Balinese rice terraces with reflective infinity pools and shaded courtyards arranged so that no straight sightline reveals the whole property at once. Every villa uses volcanic stone, teak, and grass-thatched roofing sourced from the region, an approach that keeps the resort's carbon footprint low despite its scale. The location is significant beyond aesthetics. Uluwatu sits at the edge of a coral limestone plateau, geologically distinct from the volcanic soil found through most of central Bali, which is why the cliffs here are sheer and dramatic rather than gently sloped. Local tradition holds that the nearby clifftop temple, Pura Uluwatu, is guarded by sacred monkeys and protects sailors from the spirits of the sea, a belief that has shaped how development is allowed to proceed along this coastline. The resort's pools are engineered to appear seamless with the horizon, an optical trick achieved through a slightly raised infinity edge and a hidden overflow trough that keeps the water perfectly still. As striking as this cliffside sanctuary is, it is only a warm-up act. Just a short drive away sits a villa that takes the same clifftop obsession and pushes it even further into the sky. Bulgari Resort Bali. Also on the Uluwatu cliffs, but built with an entirely different philosophy, the Bulgari Resort Bali sits atop a plateau 150 meters above the ocean, connected to its private beach by a funicular railway carved directly into the limestone. This is one of the only resorts in the world where guests descend by rail through solid rock simply to reach the sand. The villas themselves combine Italian design sensibilities with traditional Balinese pitched roofs, a deliberate cultural fusion reflecting the brand's Roman heritage layered onto Indonesian craftsmanship. Some villas include heated infinity pools that appear to spill directly toward the sea far below, an engineering feat that requires precise calculation of water pressure and structural load so far from ground level. The remoteness of the site initially terrified investors. Building materials had to be transported along narrow cliffside roads never designed for heavy construction traffic, and the entire foundation had to be reinforced against the same limestone erosion that shapes Uluwatu's famous surf breaks. What makes this villa complex so significant in our countdown is its embrace of verticality, using elevation itself as the ultimate luxury feature. But elevation is not the only extreme worth chasing. Across the Pacific, one property took the opposite approach entirely, hanging its rooms not above a cliff, but above the crashing surf of one of the most dangerous stretches of coastline in North America, Post Ranch Inn. 400 meters above the Pacific Ocean, along the wild and foggy coastline of Big Sur, California, sits a cluster of villas so precisely integrated into the mountainside that from the famous Highway 1 below, most drivers never notice them at all. Post Ranch Inn includes freestanding tree houses raised on stilts among the redwood canopy, ocean view houses built into the hillside with living roofs of native grasses, and a spa carved partially underground to protect it from the region's punishing winds. Big Sur itself is one of the most geologically unstable coastlines in the United States, where the Santa Lucia Mountains rise almost directly from the sea with almost no coastal plain to soften the transition. That instability is precisely what makes the views so staggering, and precisely why construction here required extensive seismic engineering. The villas are deliberately built without televisions or clocks in some rooms, a design philosophy meant to force guests into the rhythm of fog rolling off the ocean rather than the rhythm of daily life. Local legend among Big Sur old-timers speaks of ghost lights seen far out over the water on foggy nights, though marine biologists attribute the phenomenon to bioluminescent plankton disturbed by unseen currents. From here, our journey moves from villas perched above nature to a villa built directly into the heart of it, one that became so famous it changed the way the entire world thought about architecture. Falling Water. In the wooded hills of Mill Run, Pennsylvania, Frank Lloyd Wright designed a house in 1935 that would become arguably the single most famous private residence ever built in America. Falling Water is not built beside a waterfall, as many assume, but directly over one, with cantilevered concrete terraces extending out above the rushing water of Bear Run. Wright's engineering broke almost every architectural convention of his time, using reinforced concrete slabs that project outward with no visible external support, creating the illusion that the house is floating above the falls. The original owners, department store magnate Edgar Kaufman and his family, wanted a weekend retreat with a view of the waterfall. Wright famously decided the family should live with the sound of the waterfall constantly beneath them instead, incorporating it directly into the living room floor. Structural engineers were so worried about the cantilevers that they secretly added extra reinforcing steel against Wright's wishes, a decision that likely saved the building from serious sagging decades later. Falling Water's stone walls were built using rock quarried from the same hillside it stands on, blurring the line between what nature made and what humans built. It remains one of the most visited house museums in the world today, a permanent reminder that true architectural genius can turn a hazard, in this case a waterfall undermining a foundation, into the entire reason a building becomes immortal. But turning natural danger into a design feature is one thing. Building an entire palazzo around one of Europe's most temperamental lakes is another. Villa Pliniana. On the eastern shore of Italy's Lake Como, hidden behind cypress trees and accessible mainly by boat, Villa Pliniana has stood since the 16th century as one of the most mysterious private estates in Europe. The villa takes its name from Pliny the Younger, the Roman writer who documented a nearby intermittent spring that rises and falls several times a day, a genuine hydrological phenomenon caused by a natural siphon effect within the mountain rock, still studied by geologists today. Water from that same spring is channeled directly through the villa's interior, flowing beneath an internal grotto before spilling into the lake, an architectural choice almost unheard of in residential design. Composers and poets sought refuge here for centuries. The property is closely associated with the Romantic-era imagination of Lake Como as a place where nature and melancholy intertwine. The estate includes nearly 20 bedrooms, elaborate frescoed ceilings, and a spa building fed directly by lake water through glass walls that blur the boundary between pool and lake. Because Villa Pliniana sits on a narrow shelf of land wedged between steep mountains and deep water, it remains isolated from the busier tourist towns that ring the rest of Como, reachable only by private boat across water that plunges to nearly 400 meters in places. If a Renaissance palazzo built around a mysterious spring feels extraordinary, consider what happens when architects abandon Europe's soft green landscapes entirely and attempt something almost alien, building not near nature but within one of the harshest deserts on Earth. In the red rock wilderness of Utah's Canyon Country, near the Arizona border, sits a villa so deliberately camouflaged into the landscape that from a distance it nearly disappears against the sandstone cliffs surrounding it. Designed by architect Marwan Al-Sayed, one of the original architects behind the acclaimed Amangiri Resort, the 6-bedroom villa spans roughly 12,000 square feet across 9 private acres, built from concrete mixed with sand quarried locally so the walls literally match the desert's color. The region sits within the Colorado Plateau, a geological formation carved over millions of years by wind and water into slot canyons, mesas, and hoodoos. The same natural forces that inspired the villa's design details, including an oculus ceiling shaped to echo the eroded holes found in nearby canyon walls. The villa's 36-meter swimming pool is engineered to align perfectly with the horizon line, drawing the eye toward Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in the distance. This is a landscape long inhabited by Native American communities, and the resort works directly with the Navajo Nation to weave authentic cultural context into the guest experience, from fireside storytelling to traditional craft workshops. Surviving here as a structure means withstanding extreme temperature swings, flash flood risk in the surrounding canyons, and near total isolation from any nearby town. If the desert can be tamed into a private sanctuary this luxurious, then perhaps no environment on Earth is truly off-limits to extreme architecture, which is exactly what the next several stops in our countdown are about to prove. As we leave continents behind entirely and head for private islands that only the wealthiest handful of people on the planet will ever set foot on, scattered in the outer islands of the Seychelles, roughly 1,000 miles off the coast of East Africa, Frigate Island Private occupies a granite island so remote that it remained one of the last untouched habitats for the critically endangered Seychelles magpie robin. Only 16 villas exist across the entire island, each built from natural stone and hardwood, deliberately spaced far apart across the jungle interior to preserve both privacy and the surrounding ecosystem. The island's granite formations are among the oldest exposed rock on Earth, remnants of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, giving the terrain a texture found almost nowhere else on the planet. Because so few structures interrupt the landscape, Frigate has become a conservation stronghold, home to giant Aldabra tortoises that roam freely near the villas and a breeding program credited with helping pull the magpie robin back from the edge of extinction. Reaching the island requires a private charter flight since no commercial route exists, reinforcing the sense that arrival itself is part of the exclusivity. Guests staying in the island's most private villa often go days without encountering another guest at all, an isolation that would feel unsettling anywhere else but here feels like the entire point. If an island built around conservation feels serene, the next stop trades tranquility for theater, an island resort built less like a retreat and more like a story unfolding around its guests. In the Koh Rong archipelago off the coast of Cambodia, two small jungle islands are connected by a single wooden bridge, and together they form Song Sa Private Island, one of Southeast Asia's most architecturally distinctive private resorts. The overwater villas are built on stilts driven into a coral lagoon using reclaimed hardwood salvaged from old fishing boats and traditional Khmer structures rather than newly logged timber. A sustainability commitment that shaped the entire design process. Song Sa means the sweethearts in Khmer, a local name referencing the two islands' proximity to one another, close enough to touch yet separated permanently by water. A piece of local naming lore rather than verified history, but one the resort has built its entire romantic identity around. Coral reefs surrounding the islands were severely damaged by illegal fishing practices before the resort's founders purchased and began restoring the marine habitat, turning the property into one of the region's most active reef conservation sites. Some villas feature glass floor panels directly above the living coral, allowing guests to watch marine life from their beds without ever entering the water. Reaching the island requires a boat transfer through open sea from the Cambodian mainland, weather permitting, since the archipelago sits exposed to seasonal monsoon swells. As beautiful as these overwater sanctuaries are, they remain relatively communal compared to what comes next, a property built around the radical idea that guests should never see another human being at all. Off the coast of Belize, in the warm shallows of the Caribbean Sea, a tiny private island holds just a handful of individual villas, each one entirely self-contained with its own private plunge pool, dock, and staff, engineered so that guests can spend an entire stay without ever crossing paths with another party on the island. Cayo Espanto sits within reach of the Belize Barrier Reef, the second largest coral reef system on Earth after Australia's Great Barrier Reef. A UNESCO World Heritage Site teeming with nurse sharks, spotted eagle rays, and vibrant coral formations just offshore. Because the island itself is barely large enough to support its handful of structures, every villa had to be built on raised platforms or stilts to protect the delicate coastal ecosystem beneath it. The extreme privacy model requires an outsized staff-to-guest ratio, often exceeding 2 staff members per guest, quietly coordinating meals, boat transfers, and excursions without ever disturbing the sense of total seclusion. Belize's barrier reef system faces real ecological threats from rising sea temperatures and coral bleaching events, making resorts like this one simultaneously a luxury retreat and, increasingly, a monitored conservation zone. This obsession with total privacy on a single small island sets the stage perfectly for the next destination, where privacy is achieved not through isolation on land, but through architecture engineered to keep every villa physically detached from the water below it. In the Nunu Atoll of the Maldives, roughly 45 minutes by seaplane from the capital Malé, Vela Private Island blends traditional Maldivian architectural forms with contemporary design. Across a coral atoll formed over thousands of years by living reef organisms, the Maldives itself sits barely above sea level, the lowest lying nation on Earth, meaning every structure here is engineered with an acute awareness of rising sea levels and storm surge, a genuine and scientifically documented long-term threat to the entire country's existence. Vela's overwater villas rest on reinforced stilts sunk deep into the lagoon floor, designed to withstand both tidal shifts and the occasional cyclone that sweeps through the Indian Ocean. The island includes one of the region's only private golf courses, an engineering oddity in a nation built almost entirely of sand and coral, requiring imported soil and an elaborate irrigation system to keep the turf alive in a tropical marine climate. Guests can dine in an underground wine cellar built below the island's water table, kept climate-controlled despite constant proximity to seawater. As remarkable as Vela is, the Maldives holds still stranger secrets because this same fragile coral nation is also home to some of the most theatrical private villa engineering ever attempted. Starting with a resort that decided the roof of your bedroom should simply disappear at night. Deep within the Nunu Atoll's protected lagoon spread across 5 small islands, Sonevajani became famous in 2016 for introducing something no other resort had built before: bedrooms with retractable roofs that slide open at the push of a button, turning the ceiling into an open window onto the night sky. The resort maintains its own overwater observatory, built around a 40-centimeter telescope and staffed by a resident astronomer, making it one of the only luxury properties in the world offering formal stargazing sessions as a signature guest experience. Some villas span more than 1,400 square meters and include curved water slides that carry guests directly from an upper floor deck into the lagoon below. An engineering solution that required careful hydrodynamic testing to ensure a smooth, safe descent into open water. Sonevajani's private lagoon spans over 5.5 kilometers, sheltered enough from ocean swells that villas could be built directly over living coral gardens without disturbing the reef ecosystem beneath them. The resort has committed to recycling the vast majority of its waste and generating power from renewable sources, an unusual sustainability model for an industry often criticized for its environmental footprint. Between the retractable roofs, the water slides, and the private observatory, Sonevajani proved that Maldivian villa design could become genuinely theatrical rather than simply beautiful. But just a short flight away, at a different atoll entirely, engineers attempted something even more audacious, taking a bedroom and placing it not above the water, but beneath it. The Muraka, Conrad Maldives Rangali Island. At Rangali Island in the South Ari Atoll sits what its designers call the world's first true undersea residential suite, a 2-level villa named the Muraka, meaning coral in the Maldivian language of Divehi. The upper level looks like an elegant thatched roof beach villa, but a spiral staircase descends from it to a second, entirely submerged bedroom 16 feet below the surface of the Indian Ocean, enclosed by a curved acrylic dome roughly 7 inches thick. Engineers built the submerged suite in 3 separate sections on land, then transported each piece by barge before welding them together and lowering the 600-ton structure onto reinforced concrete piles driven into the seabed, with divers guiding the final placement underwater. From the submerged bedroom, guests watch reef sharks, rays, and tropical fish drift past at eye level with embedded exterior lighting designed to attract marine life after dark without disturbing natural nocturnal behavior. The same resort built the world's first undersea restaurant years earlier, giving its design team the specialized engineering experience needed to attempt an entire undersea bedroom. Because the structure sits directly on the ocean floor, it required extensive environmental review to ensure the surrounding coral and marine habitat would not be damaged during construction. Sleeping here means falling asleep to the sight of the open ocean pressing against curved glass just above your head, a sensation genuinely unlike anything else in residential architecture anywhere in the world. If placing a bedroom beneath the sea sounds extreme, wait until you see what one illusionist decided to do with an entire island in the Bahamas. Musha Cay. In the Exuma Island chain of the Bahamas, illusionist and entertainer David Copperfield purchased a cluster of small islands and transformed roughly 700 acres into Musha Cay, a private retreat built almost like a theatrical set designed for total immersion. Multiple individually styled villas are scattered across the property, connected by hidden pathways and a 2-mile stretch of sandbar that appears and disappears entirely with the tide, a natural phenomenon shaped by the shifting currents of the surrounding Exuma Sound. The Exumas themselves sit atop the Great Bahama Bank, a massive shallow limestone platform that creates the impossibly turquoise watercolor the region is famous for, caused by sunlight reflecting off pale carbonate sand just beneath the surface. Copperfield has incorporated elements of illusion and mystery directly into the guest experience, including hidden passageways and staged scavenger hunts across the island's beaches and coves. Because the island can only be reached by private boat or seaplane, guests who book the property typically rent the entire island exclusively, meaning every villa, beach, and hidden trail belongs to a single group for the length of their stay. The remoteness of the Exumas also makes the region vulnerable to Atlantic hurricanes, requiring the island's infrastructure to be resilient enough to withstand seasonal tropical storm activity. Musha Kai proved that private islands could be designed around narrative and spectacle rather than simply comfort, but for true exclusivity measured not in theater but in raw historical fame. Our next stop belongs to arguably the single most recognized private island retreat on the planet, Necker Island. In the British Virgin Islands, a 74-acre island surrounded by coral reef became, in 1979, the personal retreat of entrepreneur Richard Branson, who purchased it for roughly $180,000 before transforming it over decades into one of the most recognized private island resorts in the world. The island's Great House and its cluster of Balinese-style villas were rebuilt after a devastating 2011 fire destroyed the original structure, an incident that led to an even more resilient and elaborate reconstruction. Necker Island now operates largely on renewable energy, drawing power from wind and solar installations built to withstand the same Caribbean storm systems that occasionally batter the British Virgin Islands during hurricane season, including catastrophic damage suffered during Hurricane Irma in 2017. The island supports a resident population of flamingos and other wildlife introduced as part of ongoing conservation efforts, alongside coral restoration projects in the surrounding reef. Guests can book the island exclusively for private groups or, during select weeks, share it with other travelers in individual rooms, an unusual hybrid model in the ultra-luxury private island market. Because of Branson's global fame, Necker Island has hosted a long list of celebrities, entrepreneurs, and world leaders, cementing its status as much through reputation as through architecture. As iconic as Necker Island is, it represents only the entry point into an entire hidden economy of billionaires who have chosen to buy not villas, but islands outright, a trend that becomes stranger the deeper you look. In the Exuma archipelago of the Bahamas, a modestly sized 349-acre island called Belle Island commands one of the highest price-per-acre valuations of any private landmass on Earth. Purchased in 2009 by Aga Khan IV, the spiritual leader of the Ismaili Muslim community and a prominent global philanthropist, for approximately $100 million. The island's value comes not from its size, but from its proximity to established luxury infrastructure throughout the Exumas, along with private dock access and deep water approach suitable for large yachts. Much of the island remains privately developed with limited public documentation of its interior structures, consistent with the extreme discretion typical of ultra-high net worth island ownership in this region. The surrounding waters share the same shallow limestone bank geology found throughout the Exumas, producing the same brilliant turquoise shallows visible from the air across dozens of nearby cays. Because Bahamian law allows foreign nationals to purchase land relatively easily compared to many other nations, the Exumas have become a magnet for this kind of private island acquisition among global elites. Belle Island's per-acre price rivals some of the most expensive real estate markets in Manhattan, an almost absurd comparison given the island's remote, undeveloped setting decades ago. It stands as a quiet reminder that in the world of extreme private real estate, sometimes the most valuable properties are the ones deliberately kept out of public view entirely. From here, our journey moves toward an island purchased not for status, but seemingly for the sheer audacity of owning an entire golf course carved out of wilderness accessible only by private plane. Near Vancouver Island, off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, telecommunications billionaire Craig McCaw purchased the 780-acre James Island in 1994 for approximately $19 million. Transforming a site once used for explosives manufacturing into an extraordinarily private wilderness retreat. The island now includes a golf course designed by Jack Nicklaus, one of the most decorated professional golfers in history, an unusual amenity for an island with no year-round public access. A roughly 5,000-square-foot main residence anchors the property, supplemented by 6 separate guest cottages spread across the forested terrain, along with a private airstrip allowing owners and guests to bypass any need for ferry access from the mainland. The island's earlier industrial history as an explosives production site required extensive environmental remediation before any residential development could safely proceed, a detail that makes its current existence as a pristine private retreat particularly striking. McCaw's decision to ban smoking across the entire island reflects both a fire safety precaution given the surrounding dense coastal forest and a broader environmental ethic applied to the property's restoration. Weather along this stretch of the Pacific Northwest coast can shift rapidly, with cold ocean currents and dense fog rolling in even during summer months, adding a layer of unpredictability to any visit. James Island demonstrates how far private ownership can go once wilderness itself becomes the primary luxury commodity. Yet even a golf course on a remote Canadian island pales next to an entire tropical paradise transformed by one of the world's most recognizable beverage brands. In the South Pacific, roughly 40 minutes by private plane from Fiji's main international airport, a 3,500-acre island called Lokala was purchased in 2003 for approximately $10 million by Dietrich Mateschitz, the late co-founder of the energy drink company Red Bull. Over the following years, Mateschitz transformed the island into an ultra-luxury eco-resort featuring 25 individually designed villas, each built to blend into the surrounding coconut plantations and untouched tropical rainforest interior. The island includes its own 18-hole golf course, an organic working farm supplying the resort's kitchens, a private airstrip, and a wellness center, effectively functioning as a self-sufficient micronation rather than a conventional resort property. Fiji's volcanic geology gives Lokala its dramatic interior terrain, with steep forested hills rising from white sand beaches fringed by coral reef, a landscape shaped by the same tectonic activity responsible for the entire Fijian archipelago. Because the island remains largely closed to the public and accessible only through direct booking arrangements, most of the world will only ever see Lokala through photographs. Following Mateschitz's death in 2022, the island passed into the hands of his heir, continuing the family's stewardship. Lokala represents the culmination of the private island trend as pure ecological theater, an entire tropical ecosystem curated for a handful of guests at a time. Our next stop leaves tropical islands behind entirely, crossing into the cold waters of the English Channel, where 2 brothers built something closer to a fortress than a villa. In the Channel Islands, off the coast of Sark, a small island called Breku became the site of one of Europe's most unusual private construction projects. When identical twin brothers, having made their fortune in property and media, purchased the island in 1993 for roughly $4.5 million, the brothers commissioned British architect Quinlan Terry to design a mock Gothic castle featuring 3-foot-thick granite walls, luxurious reception rooms, 2 swimming pools, and a helipad built to withstand the harsh Atlantic weather that regularly batters the exposed Channel Islands coastline. Before development, the island was largely barren, its cliffs shaved and reshaped through an extensive landscaping campaign. That created artificial lakes and sheltered pockets where vegetation could finally take root against the salty ocean winds. Brecco today includes its own small village, chapel, vineyards, and orchards, an almost feudal level of self-sufficiency rarely seen on privately owned European land. The island's legal status became genuinely contentious for years, since Sark's centuries-old feudal governance system initially clashed with the brothers' modern ownership ambitions, eventually prompting significant reforms to the island's constitutional structure. Its granite construction and thick defensive walls give Brecco Castle a genuinely fortress-like character unlike almost anything else on this list, closer in spirit to a medieval stronghold than a modern luxury villa. Having crossed from Pacific Islands to a fortified castle in the English Channel, our journey now turns toward the sun-drenched French Riviera, home to one of the most storied and expensive private estates in European history. Overlooking the Mediterranean Sea near Villefranche-sur-Mer on the French Riviera, Villa Leopolda sits on roughly 8 hectares of terraced gardens and has long been considered one of the most valuable private estates in the world. The villa takes its name from King Leopold II of Belgium, who commissioned the original structure in the early 20th century as a retreat overlooking the same stretch of coastline that would later become synonymous with Europe's wealthiest visitors. The estate's terraced Mediterranean gardens descend in layers toward the sea, a landscaping style common throughout the Riviera that both maximizes sun exposure and manages the steep coastal terrain typical of this part of southern France. Over the decades, the villa has passed through a succession of extraordinarily wealthy owners, and its market valuation has at various points been estimated well beyond $500 million, making it a perennial benchmark whenever discussions turn to the world's most expensive private homes. The surrounding region, sometimes called the Côte d'Azur, owes its famous climate to the rain-shadow effect created by the nearby Alps, which block many northern weather systems and create the mild, sun-heavy conditions that made this coastline a magnet for European aristocracy more than a century ago. Villa Leopolda's scale and history place it in a different category from the tropical villas earlier in our countdown, representing old-world European wealth rather than modern tropical escapism. Just a short drive inland from this legendary coastal estate sits a chateau built far more recently, yet designed entirely in homage to the grandeur of French royal history. In Louveciennes, a short distance outside Paris, a chateau built in the early 21st century deliberately imitates the grandeur of French royal architecture, complete with gilded interiors, elaborate gardens, and a design ethos referencing the Baroque splendor of Versailles itself, despite the building itself being a thoroughly modern construction rather than a genuine historical palace. Its interiors reportedly include gold leaf detailing, marble staircases, and an underground complex featuring a nightclub, cinema, and wine cellar, blending old-world aesthetic ambition with distinctly modern amenities rarely found in actual historic palaces. The chateau sold in a private transaction reported to be among the highest prices ever paid for a residential property in Europe, reinforcing how thoroughly modern buyers have embraced historical pastiche as a genuine luxury architectural style. Louveciennes itself carries real royal history, having once been home to actual mistresses of French kings during the 18th century, giving the region a genuine verified connection to the aristocratic grandeur this newer chateau consciously imitates. Building an entirely new structure designed to look centuries old required specialized craftsmen skilled in techniques largely abandoned by mainstream modern construction, from hand-carved stone detailing to traditional plasterwork ceilings. The property demonstrates an entirely different kind of extreme luxury from anything earlier in this list, one rooted not in remote wilderness or ocean engineering, but in the deliberate recreation of aristocratic fantasy within reach of a major world capital. From European royal pastiche, our journey crosses the Atlantic one final time, toward a mega mansion in Los Angeles, built purely to chase a single, almost absurd record. In the hills of Bel Air, Los Angeles, a property known simply as The One was constructed, with the explicit ambition of becoming the largest and most expensive private home ever built in the United States. eventually reaching roughly 95,000 square feet across multiple structures, connected by sweeping glass corridors. The project famously ran into severe financial trouble during construction. The immense project eventually forced its developer into a widely publicized bankruptcy, and sending the unfinished mega mansion to a widely publicized auction where it eventually sold for approximately $126 million, far below its original nine-figure asking ambitions. The estate includes multiple swimming pools, a private nightclub, a 4-lane bowling alley, and a motor gallery designed to display an extensive car collection behind glass, features intended to rival hotel-scale amenities within a single private residence. Los Angeles hillside terrain, prone to both wildfire risk and occasional landslide activity during heavy rain events, required extensive engineering to stabilize the massive structure across its sloped Bel Air lot. The saga surrounding the One became a cautionary tale within the luxury real estate industry, illustrating how even seemingly limitless ambition can collide with financial reality. When a project becomes too large to sustain, its story stands in sharp contrast to almost every other property on this list, most of which were completed exactly as their owners intended. As dramatic as this mega mansion's rise and fall has been, our next stop belongs to one of the most quietly influential private homes ever built by a single individual, a residence built not to impress the public, but to prototype the future itself. On the shores of Lake Washington in Medina, near Seattle, a sprawling residence known informally as Xanadu 2.0 was built over roughly 7 years by Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, reportedly costing more than $60 million to complete, and spanning around 66,000 square feet dug partially into the surrounding hillside. The estate includes a trout stream stocked with live fish flowing through the property, an underground garage capable of holding dozens of vehicles, and a domed library featuring a rare handwritten manuscript by Leonardo da Vinci, displayed as part of the home's private collection. Guests reportedly receive an electronic pin upon arrival that can personalize temperature, lighting, and even the artwork displayed on digital screens. Throughout the house, as they move from room to room, an early and ambitious application of home automation technology decades before smart homes became mainstream. Because the property sits directly on Lake Washington's shoreline, extensive environmental permitting was required before construction, given the ecological sensitivity of the lake's shallow forested banks. The estate incorporates a 500-year-old Douglas fir tree into its design, with construction planned around preserving the tree rather than removing it, reflecting an environmental sensitivity unusual for a residence of this scale. Xanadu 2.0 represents something different from almost every other property on this list. A private home used as much as a technology showcase as a place of luxury and rest. And yet even this legendary residence, filled with underground garages and rare manuscripts, cannot match the sheer scale of the final and most extraordinary private home on our entire list. A residence that does not simply sit on land, but rises above an entire city as its own private skyscraper. Rising 27 stories and roughly 173 meters above Mumbai's Altamount Road, Antilia is widely regarded as the most expensive private residence ever constructed. Built between 2006 and 2010 for Indian billionaire Mukesh Ambani at a reported cost approaching $2 billion, with later valuations estimating the tower's worth at over $4.5 billion. The building takes its name from a legendary Phantom Island once rumored by early Atlantic explorers to be a land of untold wealth, a piece of maritime folklore rather than verified history, chosen deliberately to evoke myth and grandeur rather than any real geographic place. Designed by the American firm Perkins & Will with construction led by Leighton Holdings, the tower was engineered to withstand a magnitude 8 earthquake despite housing just one family across its upper residential floors. An extraordinary structural commitment for a private home rather than a public building. The design incorporates recurring lotus and sun motifs throughout, references to Hindu symbolism realized in crystal, marble, and inlaid mother of pearl across different levels, with the building's principles following Vastu Shastra, a traditional Hindu architectural philosophy comparable to Feng Shui that reportedly influenced the layout of nearly every floor. The lower levels of the tower are dedicated almost entirely to vehicle storage, with a garage reportedly capable of holding more than 160 cars, alongside its own dedicated maintenance facility, while the top of the structure houses 3 separate helipads, a feature requiring special aviation authority approval given its location above one of the most densely populated cities on the planet. The building's final 4 levels function as hanging gardens, planted specifically to absorb sunlight and reduce heat entering the living spaces below, an environmental design choice folded into the tower's otherwise maximalist ambitions. More than 600 staff members are reportedly required to maintain the property, an operational scale closer to a 5-star hotel than any conventional private residence anywhere else on Earth. Antilia has become as much a symbol as a structure, alternately admired as an architectural marvel and criticized for towering over one of the most economically unequal cities in the world, a debate that shows no sign of resolving. Whatever judgment history ultimately renders on Antilia, it stands today as undeniable proof of just how far the idea of a private home can be pushed, transforming an entire skyscraper, earthquake engineering, ancient religious symbolism, and a mythical lost island's name into a single, unrepeatable address. From cliffside jungle retreats in Thailand to a private skyscraper rising above the rooftops of Mumbai, these 25 residences reveal something larger than architecture alone. They show what happens when human ambition refuses to accept the limits of geography, gravity, or even the ocean floor itself. Some of these places were built to disappear quietly into cliffs and coral reefs. Others were built to be seen from miles away, unmistakable symbols of what unlimited resources can create. But underneath every engineering triumph and every record-breaking price tag lies the same simple human impulse that has always driven us to build: the desire to carve out a place in this vast, unpredictable world that feels entirely, unmistakably our own. If this journey through the world's most extraordinary private residences left you in awe, give this video a like, subscribe for more journeys into the planet's most impossible places, and stay with us, because the next place we uncover together might just be even more unbelievable than the last.